Welcome to Horror Makes Us Happy, the podcast where we ask the question, what is it about horror that makes us happy? Your hosts are Steve Becker and myself, Chris Whitman, and you can find out more about us at our website, horrormakesushappy.com. Before we get started, this is the trigger warning. This is a horror podcast. We're going to be talking about horror culture, so there could be sensitive subjects such as murder, child abuse, rape, F-bombs, Z-bombs, C-bombs, D-bombs, all the bombs. This is a horror podcast. We talk about messed up things, so I have to do this disclaimer, but I'd say like 90% to 95% of our listeners are probably here for exactly that reason. And with that out of the way, welcome to the show. Coming up in the future, we will be interviewing author Robert P. Atong and writer and producer Joe Prendes. But today, it's a very special day for me. This is, I have been looking forward to this ever since we started this podcast and started coming up with a list of people to interview because I am a huge fan of the Woman trilogy now. Thank you for that, our guest. And today, we have with us Pollyanna McIntosh, best known for The Woman, Darlin, and you might have seen her on The Walking Dead. Welcome
Hello.
to the show. It is an honor.
Oh, thanks so much. Pleasure to be here. How lovely.
Yes. And one more honorable mention, if I may. Also, probably, even though I'm a huge fan of The Woman trilogy, my favorite film of yours has always been Let Us Pray. That is just a beautiful film.
Oh, it's a great film. We had a great time making that. Thanks for that. Yeah, I just love our director, and I'm very close friends with Liam, who was the male lead in that. I've been spending a lot of time in Ireland lately, so I've gotten to hang out with my Irish pals a lot. It's been lovely.
Nice.
Yeah.
Before we get into the meat of the interview, do you want to let us know what you're currently working on?
I'm not allowed to.
Oh, NDA. Okay.
NDA to wazoo with both the thing I'm working on and the thing I have coming out. But I can talk about, so I can't talk about a thing I'm acting in right now, but I can talk about a thing that I am in the post of, and that's called Quicksand, and it's a short film, the first time I've directed something that I didn't write, written by Siobhan Callahan, an Irish actor-writer who plays the lead. I play her girlfriend in it, and it's a 20-minute short that I directed, and I'm excited for everyone to see it. It's about a committed lesbian couple who, one of them has finally got pregnant through IVF, and she doesn't know that her partner is a sex addict and keeping that on the DL. And it causes some interesting complications.
Sure.
Interesting.
Yes.
Cool. Well, I don't remember what we did or did not discuss in our emails back and forth, but the theme of our podcast is less about your body of work and more about you as a horror fan. And we talk about your experiences with the genre from childhood through adult years, and then some wrap-up questions at the end that maybe cover your entire life.
Wow. I'm glad we have this time.
It's not meant to be a therapy session though, so if there's any questions that you don't want to answer, just say pass and we'll move on. But
Thanks.
starting with childhood, what are some of your earliest memories of scary things?
Oh, so many scary things. It's lovely to be able to go down the road thinking about this stuff. And my first movie at the cinema was Ghostbusters, which, is a comedy horror, but I was really shit scared of the woman in the library.
Mm-hmm.
She scared the shit out of me. Even just looking for the ghost in the library was really scary to me. I was supposed to be going to see, I was supposed to be going to see 101 Dalmatians.
Bit of a twist there. Okay.
Yeah. But it was all sold out. So we got to go and see Ghostbusters, which is really unusual because my parents were my mother certainly was quite strict about watching scary things or, things that we weren't age appropriate, sex and stuff. We weren't allowed to do any of that, but somehow I managed to see Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom around the same age. Love that.
Well, I mean, there's no sex in that I can think of.
But there's they eat monkey brains. There's some graphicness in there.
Yeah. That's what I'm remembering from Temple of Doom and the horror world is like the sheep eye soup, the chilled monkey brains, the baby snakes coming out of the big snake on the table.
Yep.
And the guy plunging his hand in with his nails and pulling out the guy's heart. Doesn't that happen in that film?
It does, yeah.
Was it that
Calibar.
one? Yes.
Calibar, yeah. The torture-y shit going on was really scary. And now I come to think of it, I did that in The Woman, essentially, to Cleek. I would have to ask Lucky now if he got that from Indiana, or if he was even aware that he got that from Indiana Jones, or if Indiana Jones got it from the same source that he did.
I like to think Indiana Jones copied you guys.
He definitely went back in time and forward in time, back and copied us. And the other film I was thinking of that I saw around the age of 6 that was really terrifying, and I was sat with my sister. I remember distinctly that she was knitting, and she was using this huge carving knife to cut her wool. And my mum was upstairs. So we were both doing things that we probably wouldn't have been allowed to do if parents were around. For sure wouldn't have been allowed to do. And watching The Omen, such a great film. And
it is. Impacted
me hugely. And him pushing his mother over the balcony of the stair, you know, that amazing moment where he's riding his little, is it his trike? In The Omen.
I think so. It has been a while since I've seen The Omen.
Close to The Shining, where in The Shining he has the trike, but it's a different.
I think in The Omen it was more of like a traditional metal trike, like it wasn't the big wheel plastic kind. But I do believe he was riding a tricycle. Right there.
Yeah, and just everything in The Omen. His dad finding the 666 under his hair, in the bed, and the dogs at the grave.
Was the first Omen the one where the guy got his head cut off by a sheet of glass? Was it that one?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I think that is the first one.
That's a good movie to watch at 6 years old. Yeah.
Yeah, it taught me a lot. It's like, well, now I know how to kill everyone. Should I need to? And my sister's knife somehow got in my hands, and I was like fiddling with my jeans. You know, when you've got like a little tear in your jeans, and I was just fiddling with it with my fingers because I was nervous watching it. And I was I started using the knife to do the same thing. And I was running it across my knee. And when the priest got that spike through his heart, do you remember that off the top of the church?
Yeah.
I just, with my knife across my knee, and it actually cut. I was like, and up to my mom, and I said, Mom. And I realized, as she was saying what happened, I realized, oh shit, I can't tell her that.
Right, like we have a Christmas Story scenario here. No, I didn't shoot my eye out. It was
totally Christmas Story.
Bicycle.
So he said, "Did you run into the side of the cabinet?" And I said,
Yes,
I did. That is exactly what happens.
How did you know?
How did you know? You just so smart. You've outsmarted me again. And then I couldn't resist, though, as I walked out of the bedroom. And I was fine. It wasn't a big cut. It was fine. As I walked out of my mum's bedroom, I was like, by the way, I don't think Tilly should have that really big knife to cut her knitting with.
Wow.
I am not proud of that, but I remember, I have to be honest, that's exactly what I did. And then, of course, the whole deck of House of Cards just came down, you know.
Oh, did she figure it out after that?
Yeah.
Well, then you got what was coming to you.
All is fair in sibling rivalry.
Yeah,
exactly. And another one that I was thinking from when we lived in South America and Colombia at that time when I watched Ghostbusters the movies and when I watched The Omen. But before that, we lived in Portugal, and there was this like golf club, country club, whatever, that my parents would go to at the weekend. It was like, I don't know, it was a sports club. It was the Oporto British Club. That's what it was. So I guess they could hang out with other British people. And we would go and play in the pool and whatnot. And there was a room that you could go into to watch a film with all the other kids. And E.T. was one of the earliest ones. I think that was possibly the first movie that I ever saw. And that blew my tiny mind. And the horror element of that is, of course, the guys, the government guys coming in and taking
absolutely terrifying. Yeah.
Absolutely terrifying. And even E.T. himself early on was a little bit scary, you know? And then the film that I definitely wasn't allowed to watch in that room because my mum knew how sensitive I was Watership Down. And so I was not allowed to see that. So I snuck outside. I was 4 years old, and I watched it through the window.
Oh, even better. Just, no words for context, just all the slaughter and horribleness.
cried my tiny eyes out.
I bet. Yeah, I've watched it. I'd never heard of it as a child. Luckily, I saw some things like Secret of Nim and
Oh yeah.
I think Plague Dogs as a young child, but I'd never seen Watership Down until I was an adult. And watching that, I thought, I am glad I didn't see this as a child.
Right.
This would have been traumatizing.
Yeah.
Yeah, even at 4, I thought to myself, they knew what they were talking about. I shouldn't have watched that film. So traumatized.
But did you learn your lesson?
I guess not.
That's why we're here. I noticed a bit of a trend in those first 3 movies, though. They're all like they're seemingly child for children movies, for lack of a better term, but they have scary elements to them, like Ghostbusters. It's a family fun movie. I think it was even PG, maybe PG-13. But just the overall tone, the score, the way the lighting, the way that they portrayed that woman in the library, it was scary.
Yeah.
So they it's like a carrot and stick, or bait and switch. They bring you into a family movie, and then, by the way, we're going to scare the piss out of you.
Yeah. And also the super exciting and scariness of Sigourney Weaver when she turns is really intense as well. I remember admiring her immensely. How cool she was.
She was great in that.
She was pretty damn sexy too.
She was.
Like, there is no Dana.
That's what ladies can be like.
So let me think here for a second. Ghostbusters,
Library
E.T.
Lady, E.T.
What was the other one?
Watership Down.
Yeah.
And then we were talking about The Omen as well, which is about a kid, but ain't so kid friendly.
Right.
Yeah.
The reason that I was thinking about these is some of the people that we've talked to, there's like a dividing line or defining line where prior to a particular moment in life, they were afraid of horror, and then after that, they enjoyed it. But it sounds like, at least for the ones that you've been describing, that it was a mixture of enjoyment and, well, I mean, like, for example, Ghostbusters, that's an easy one because they do mix the horror with humor.
Yeah.
Not quite as much Indiana Jones or The Omen or E.T.
Indiana Jones, that was the other one. That's another one that's kind of advertised as a family film, and then a man rips another man's heart out of his chest.
Yeah.
As one does. Halloween. Did you participate in Halloween as a child?
I definitely dressed up a lot as a witch as a child. And I remember another fancy dress party. This is under the age of, I'm talking like again, like 6, 7. And I would dress up with this big orange skirt and this, one of those pullover masks that goes right over your head, so it has the hair on the back and the mask on the front. And it was rubbery. It's really cool. And it was like a big hooked nose witch, old wrinkly face. And she had short white hair at the back. And I just would put it over my head and just stonk around in a black top and an orange skirt and be like, and I loved that. But I don't really know if that was Halloween. I don't remember. I think the first time I remember Halloween, it was probably when my little sister, I would have been taking her out, so I would have been a young teen.
Okay.
And I would have been taking her out trick-or-treating.
Okay.
Well, it's the next phase, adolescence. We'll come to that.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds like you're talking about wearing these costumes not on Halloween, because you said you would wear them all the time.
Yeah, pretty much any dress I got. I would also dress up a lot as a little Native American girl, but I thought that I was kind of a cowgirl. It was from my grandmother, I think, so it was really old. And it was like a suede little skirt with the tassel, with the cut-ups, streamered, and then a little waistcoat that was streamered as well. And I would take a stick and I would take my sister's Bugs Bunny toy and I would tie the bunny up on the back of the stick like I'd hunted it and caught it. Like a cartoon, where it'd be all four paws up kind of thing.
Little Daniel Boone-esque.
Yes, exactly. Little Daniel Boone-esque. If I'd been able to have one of those hats with the, the coyote tail on it, I'd be a raccoon tail, I just would have been in my absolute seventh heaven. And I would stonk around the garden and just, I don't know, pretend to be a cowgirl. But I also sort of wanted to be like a Native American girl, like what I would have called at the time an Indian, I was waiting for my blonde hair to go dark. All I wanted to be when I grew up was a little Native American girl.
Did you have any really scary dreams when you were a kid?
Oh, tons of them. Yeah.
Did you have any reoccurring dreams?
I would sort of I would be screamed at a lot by a female voice that I didn't recognize, or just a woman screaming at me all the time. It's horrible.
What's the Freud translation for that one, I wonder?
There's definitely a good deal of possibilities. There are definitely a good deal of possibilities. But it's funny, a lot of the things that used to haunt me a bit when I was young, I now relate a lot to having ADHD. Like since diagnosis about 3 years ago. And like a lot of this stuff makes sense now that I've sort of looked into it more. But I mean, every kid has nightmares, of course. I can't think of a recurring one.
It's okay. Not every question is going to land.
Yeah.
Did you have anything in real life terrify you as a child?
Any near-death experiences or just terrifying events?
Yes.
Given the tone of that yes, that you can also pass.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a bit like, yeah. No, I can probably go into some easy ones. I remember seeing a dead guy on the road from a motorcycle accident.
Wow.
That'll do it.
On a holiday. He was just, I couldn't see his face because helmet, but I knew he was dead, and it was just his body and all the leather, you know, all the proper motorcycle gear. And I remember his feet being so still and up.
Was there anybody else?
There was a, oh, sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
This is like fucking therapy. We might be onto something here. Carry on. There was also in Colombia, there was an incident where there was a lot of gunshots going off at a parade. It was like one of the big Catholic festivals, and we were in a friend's apartment building very high up, and we were watching it from very high up. And then these gunshots started going off, and then the streets were full of people, so they were all trying to scatter, you know, and get free of it. Like the hot dog truck was turning over and went on fire, and it was really kind of scary and chaotic.
Yeah.
And everyone was screaming, guerrilleros, because that was like the guerrillas, you know, they thought it was like the guerrillas coming in. But it wasn't. It was just somebody being drunk, and it was fine.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. It was fine. It didn't escalate.
At least not worse. The question I was going to ask next is, did you have anybody else in your family who was a fan of horror?
That's a really good question. I don't know really, because it wasn't. I mean, you know what? I watched Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom with my dad, but I wouldn't say he was a fan of horror. He did play the devil once, though. He was
in
an
a play, or
before I came along, and he was in an Elizabeth Taylor, Richard Burton starring film with him as the next in line on the cast list of Dr. Faustus. But because he wasn't available for the ADR, they ended up dubbing him. And because they were doing spooky dooky effects of the devil, his face is kind of contorted. So it's funny. It's sort of like he's there, but he's not all there, you know?
What's the name of the movie, Dr. Faustus? Or?
Yeah, Dr. Faustus.
Interesting.
Yeah, they had performed it as a play at Oxford when my dad was there. And they'd come in their height of their fame and come to do theatre there. And they cast some of the Oxford undergraduates and in the play, and then they ended up making the movie, and my dad was taken onto the film production.
Nice.
Yeah. So no, I wouldn't say he was a fan of horror, but yeah, it wasn't until I was like a young teen, like 12 type thing, that I was around people that were into horror at all.
Okay. So teenagers, what were some of the scary books or stories or movies that you remember from your teenage years?
The Interview with the Vampire comics. I was mad for them. Oh, they were amazing. And again, it's that mix of like sexual awakening and understanding of what that adult world looks, you know, like the adult world of sex that you're not in yet, you know. Like why I say again, because it's like Sigourney Weaver in Ghostbusters, and then the body horror and the fierceness of some of the characters, and also the trying to be a good guyness in Interview with the Vampire as well. I also really loved, you know, trying to do right. And Nosferatu, seeing that for the first time through my slightly older teenage friends who were really into movies.
Okay.
That was amazing and terrifying. I was trying to be cool. Like I could sit and watch this, but it was so fucking scary.
It really still is.
It still is, I know.
What was scary to you about it?
The psychopathy in his eyes, the absolute confidence and comfort with what he was doing, the way he was watching the women and going after women, you already had that sense in the world as a young person, like, and his fucking hands,
Yeah, and you're right about his eyes and his face. Like, he really does just naturally have that demented, bug-eyed,
you think there was some makeup there, but I'm sure that helped.
Yeah, of course there was makeup, which accentuated it. But it's like Marty Feldman with eye makeup.
Yeah, actually, it's not that far off.
And his hands, the way they could get you even when he was far from you. You were just never safe. Oh, and and then The Shining, which I think I watched when I was 13, and I watched it round at my friend Catherine's house, and I was sleeping over in her bedroom, and so I had like a bed on the floor type situation, and I couldn't sleep the whole night after watching The Shining.
Well, of course not. You're on the floor. You're next to where underneath the bed is.
No. But even with Kuth in the room, I called her Kuth. Even with Kuth in the room, I just was absolutely petrified, and I just remember watching the lights go by from the cars outside. She and her mum had a flat on a main road, and watching the car lights go by, and thinking, I'm still not asleep. It's madness. It was just so scary. And again, probably the Jack Nicholson's performance, just like, you believe that guy would stop at nothing, and that he was looking at his family and he was ready to kill and enjoy it. Just terrifying. Plus the bloody woman behind the shower curtain and the twins. I mean, the blood coming down the car. Just everything about it was so horrifying, and how swiftly they killed your man early on. Yeah. I also was really, really terrified of The Witch and the Wizard of Oz. And it's funny, Lucky McKee, when we were doing an interview about the woman, was asked about what his favorite horrors were, and he said The Wizard of Oz, and I thought, yeah, man, I can relate to that, because I was terrified of that witch. Just her feet sticking out from under the house were enough to,
Right.
And yet, as a child, you loved dressing up as a witch.
Yeah, maybe that was my way of like taking control of my fears.
Maybe.
I think I would have seen The Wizard of Oz after that, lots of dressing up as a witch time. Yeah. But maybe there is something very sort of, not, I know, Freudian, but psychoanalytical in that. Maybe a witch did scare the hell out of me. And when you were asking me if anyone else was into, I just remember that my big sister Lucy had this book about prosthetics and monsters in horror. And I don't think she was necessarily into horror, but she had that book. I think it might have even been from like an uncle or something, and it was just left, But whatever, she picked it up, so she must have been interested enough. And I found that in her room, and I couldn't even look at the cover. It was so scary. It had a pope, like white, bald pope in the red cardinal, I guess, in the red cardinal sort of. No, he was a pope, the red and the white, and he was getting his brain cut open. What's it called? Like they're doing
craniotomy,
trepanation.
Not the holes. No, when they used to do it. Like in Cuckoo's Nest, they do it. They cut the whole.
Oh, lobotomy.
Thank you, lobotomy. He was having the start of a lobotomy. And so it was just his very, very white, made-up skin with this line of red on the knife as someone was cutting him with the lobotomy, and his red robes and his white collar. And he was sort of leaning back almost like in a barber's chair getting it done. And it was the most scary thing. And that theme has stuck with me. It definitely comes up in Darlin as well.
What theme?
Scary ass religious figures.
Yeah.
In the reds and the whites. Catholicism, probably.
Organized religion in general, but also Catholicism, because they have some very ominous appearances.
The look of Catholicism is very cinematic, and it lends itself well to cinema, I should say. And I guess there were a lot of 60s, 70s horror movies using that.
Reds and whites are very highly contrasting. So there's,
and a 60s red is a very specific red.
Yes,
as well.
It is.
Right.
That's Argento red almost.
Exactly. And Dario Argento is one of my absolute favorites. So all comes through.
So you said that you started participating in Halloween as a teen. Did you have a favorite costume?
Well, I wasn't like a big thing in the UK so much. I think I was more taking my little sister around trick-or-treating. So I probably would have liked to have looked a bit cooler than to dress up when I was taking her out, you know? But amongst friends, any opportunity to dress up, for sure. And as I moved away from home when I just turned, I can't remember if I was 15 or 16. I might have been turning 16 on the move. And then when I had my own place, you know, with loads of flatmates, obviously. I wasn't a rich child or anything. And then we would dress up any opportunity and do goofy things. I think I just always liked it to be different every time, you know. But definitely always scary for Halloween. Never, not so much the American style of you can be a firefighter or something. No, Halloween's about scary costumes.
As it should be.
Yeah.
Did you have any really scary dreams as a teen?
Yeah, I don't really remember them, but definitely always had nightmares. Yeah.
Was there ever a time in your teenage years when you were felt perfectly at peace or blissful or calm?
Many times.
That's good.
One that stands out?
I started smoking weed at 13, so you know.
There you go.
I can almost hear my mother's voice. Oh, Polly, why did you?
That activity is known to provide many a instance of calmness and bliss. Yes.
Yeah, and nature. I mean, just you know, I'm very lucky to live in Scotland at that age as well, and get to go up hills and picnic with your friends in parks and hills and music and dancing. I mean, I got into nightclubs at that age. You know, I was out clubbing from 13. And
13? Wow.
Again, sorry, Ma.
It's been long enough.
Parties and the joy of dancing. And I was also like acting already, doing like plays and that then. So, and friends and, you know, certain foods, just like bliss. Lots of life. Great. Trying acid for the first time. I've never talked about this.
Glad to hear that was a blissful experience. That can go either way. Right?
No, I had a really bad acid trip too.
Everyone has at least one. Yeah,
really bad one. That stopped.
Well, everyone who's done acid. Obviously, the people who haven't done it haven't had a bad trip.
Yeah, but it was the rave culture for a minute really had me happy. And
I forgot. Yeah, you guys really had it pretty good over there for a while.
Yeah. I've said this numerous times. I sometimes wish I was 10 years younger, or 10 years older, so that I could have been old enough to go clubbing in those days, like in the early 90s to mid 90s.
Well, not only that, but like the UK, Scotland, Ireland. Those.
Well, yeah, also not in America, because that's different experience over there. You guys were college league, we were high school.
Yeah. We could have a long conversation on that.
That is a whole other podcast.
Back to the horror.
Yes. Please. I had actually forgotten to ask that question for the childhood section. Do you remember if there was a particular moment in your childhood where you were completely calm or safe or at bliss?
Yeah, again, it would have been with, you know, my cat or my dog, or out just looking at trees. And I had a sort of ghost moment when I was really young that was quite sad, but also quite blissful at the same time. So I used to my parents weren't religious at all, but my best friend Sophie, lived up the way. She was Catholic, and she would do with the rosaries and everything. So I had an understanding of Catholicism, and it was all around us, you know. I'm in Portugal. And so I used to bury my toy soldiers in the wood opposite the house and think that it was like Jesus was going to come back, you know, if I buried toy soldiers.
Well, how apropos on today.
Right.
Quite. Happy Easter. So I'm in the woods burying my toy soldiers, and my cat, Susie, had just died. And Susie was a one green eye, one blue eye Siamese cat. So not that common looking cat, right? And I saw a Siamese cat in the woods. And of course I thought, oh my God, it's Susie's ghost, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so it had one green eye and one blue eye in my head, but I'm not sure if I could actually see its eyes, right? In my head, it was Susie as a ghost. And it went to go up a tree. So I said to my sister, Tilly, go get a saucer of milk, you know, and try and make her come down, because maybe if she doesn't go up the tree, she won't go up to heaven and we can keep her, you know? So you've got to go and get a saucer of milk and I'll keep an eye on her. So you know, she'd gone up the tree and I sat at the bottom of the tree praying for her to come down. So I'd close my eyes. And then when Tilly came back with the saucer and we looked up, she was gone.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my most like ghostly, exciting childhood memory, you know. But later on when I was about 14, so this happened when I was like four or five. When I was 14, we went on holiday to Portugal with my parents, and we went back to that house because my dad knew who had bought the house and who lived there now. And so we went to visit the house, and no word of a lie, they had a Siamese cat with one green eye, one blue eye, and they called it Susie.
Huh.
That is super weird.
That is. They had no prior knowledge of your cat either. Just
no, not as far
total
as
happenstance.
It was like I was like asking, "Oh my goodness, what's its name?" And they just said Susie, and I just went, "What the hell?" And they were like, "That's really weird."
I wonder if there was, you know, maybe if they had heard something or somebody had said something and they just didn't remember.
Maybe. I mean, who calls their cat Susie? So, you know.
It's because life is a simulation. Everything is fake and we're all in a hologram. You know, that's what it is.
I think it's what Conan says. You know, Conan says, not Conan the Barbarian.
I was going one way.
The first one was Orion.
Conan O'Brien. I heard a podcast interview with him once, and he was talking about crossovers and coincidences and people coming back round. And he said, well, I think that life is just like a good script. You know, you can only have a certain amount of characters and a certain amount of locations, and they're going to repeat themselves, you know?
Yeah, that's a very
I like that
intelligent way of looking at it. Yeah.
The thing that I learned from, I can't remember if it was counseling or my time in the 12-step stuff, but a phrase that I have liked is that time is not a circle, it's a spiral. Because
I see. Yeah.
You come close to places that you were before, but you're not the exact same place. You've grown, you've learned things, you know things that you didn't know before.
Sure.
But, you know, seeing similar things triggers similar emotions, which of course remind us of other times that we felt those emotions or saw those things, you know. And that's also ironically enough, part of the reason that we break this interview into these 3 sections, because sometimes remembering something that, you know, you're talking about in one section will remind you of something that you missed from a previous section.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Nicely done.
Happens a lot.
Let's move into adult years. What were some of the scary stories or books or movies you remember from, you know, now as an adult?
I have to go back to the last section now because I'm seeing Pet Sematary written down. Pet Sematary.
You know, it's funny when you were talking about, you know, burying the soldiers in the wood and then your cat passing away, and that was the first thought in my head was, I wonder if she's seen Pet Sematary.
I saw Pet Sematary probably when I was again like 12, and I just loved it and thought it was super scary. And I was already reading like pretty heavy literature at that age, and so I kind of thought, Stephen King, whatever, you know.
Stephen King was the vanilla to you, like sure.
And then I saw Pet Sematary, and I was like, oh my god, it's so great. And I definitely was influenced by that great horror moment of the slice of the back of the foot from under the bed. Scary biscuits. And I've definitely got a foot thing going on through my film making. And I put a lot of that down to Pet Sematary. I'm probably Tarantino later. And I'm also remembering Alien and Aliens.
Of course.
And Blade Runner, more sci-fi-ish, but, you know, still Aliens is, I mean, it's horror.
I'm curious what books you were reading that made you think that Stephen King was meh.
Well, I was reading a lot of feminist stuff. I was reading Marilyn French, and I was reading like Catch-22 and 1984.
Okay. More cerebral things.
Shakespeare plays.
Not to say Stephen King's not cerebral, but
Yeah,
I mean, 1984 is clearly more.
Yeah, I was
different.
like, I just thought this was pulp, basically, which it turns out there's nothing wrong with pulp.
Right.
And also Stephen King is much more than pulp.
Yes.
Speaking of pulp, seeing Reservoir Dogs, huge, like bloody hell.
There was a bit of red stuff in Reservoir Dogs. Yes,
Yeah.
there was a little bit.
Tim Roth was red all over at one point. And the ear slicing scene was horrifying. And then David Lynch movies like Blue Velvet, and the ear.
Still haven't
the ear
seen
in the
Blue
grass.
Velvet. It's on the list.
Are these? I'm sorry. Was this for the teen section or adult section?
So I think
Crossing
before we
over.
were doing young teen, and this is like
Older teen.
13, 14. This is like 14, 15 probably years old, going to see these things at the cinema. And then as an adult, I think I sort of learned as far as horror, quote unquote, standard horror, like the horror movies that were out weren't the ones that interested me as much, the ones that were out in the cinema, because they weren't as good as other indie movies I wanted to go and see in my mind, because a lot of it was American stuff and a lot of it was, to me, too scary for me to enjoy it, or too popular for me to think it would be my jam, So I didn't really get into horror as an adult until I was in horrors as an actor. And then I got to see great indie horror and foreign horror and got told about great American horrors that wouldn't have been out at the cinema because it was kind of popcorn stuff really in like the mid-90s, early 2000s,
I'm curious about your comment about things being too popular. What do you have against things being too popular?
Well, when I was
normies like them, it's stupid.
When I was 12 years old, I fell in love with a lad who was raised in a hippie commune.
Okay,
this is going to get weird again. So he was raised in a hippie commune in a house on Findhorn Place in Scotland, in Edinburgh, and his mother had died when they lived in that house, and two women, a lesbian couple from the hippie commune, had taken him, Tom, under their wing and had raised him after his mother dying. His father wasn't around. His mother's boyfriend took his younger brother, who was his kid, and took him, but Tom had no one to go with. So he went with this couple. And one of them became his legal guardian, and then her girlfriend also, looked after him. So I spent a lot of time over in his world with him. And I would go on CND marches, and I began to understand, things politically and the labor movement and, the iniquities of the world, which I already knew about, having been raised in places like Colombia, where I saw a lot of, begging and a lot of people who weren't being taken care of. So I had discovered feminism as well. And, so I just was I was very aware of capitalism and its clutches and its injustices. And so going to see a huge popular American studio movie didn't appeal to me, whether it was horror or otherwise, So even though, I understood how cool American culture was in one sense, because, it's what you grow up with, like, and then they'd made movies like E.T., for instance, and Star Wars and, Alien and Blade Runner and all these movies that I would watch with this guy and his friends. But I felt like the horror world was full of like girls being seen as just good for running away and screaming with boobs bouncing, and couldn't take care of themselves, and the excitement and the eroticism of being stabbed or being chased by a man or whatever just seemed really fucked up. And this whole sort of jocks against the world, I don't know, just like
You put it that way, you make it sound like you prefer, quality writing and literature rather than, sticking with the cookie cutter mold of slasher. That's just that's crazy talk.
Yeah. So that's what it was. And also I would have been shit scared. I would not have wanted to watch like Nightmare on Elm Street and know about a guy who would get me in my dreams. Like that really terrified me. So I never saw, Halloween. I never saw I never saw any of the Nightmare on Elm Streets. I never saw any of that stuff.
Yeah, the Friday the 13th, so the classic slashers. Was it that you were not allowed to, or that you
I
would
definitely
avoid them
wasn't
just because
allowed
of disinterest?
when they would have come out, and I wouldn't have even been able to go to the cinema when they came out. They would have been I would have been way too young when that stuff actually came out. But later on, I didn't have a hankering to like catch up on those things.
Well, that's what I was going to say. It for a second there, it sounded like you were about to say that it hit a little too close to home.
Definitely wasn't chased by anyone with a ski mask, for sure.
Well,
but yeah, women in horror in those kinds of slasher movies like that just nah. I did go and see Scream at the cinema when it came out, though. That would have been in the 90s, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of had to, or maybe in the early 2000s. And I remember going to the loo either during the film or after the film and just being like, I can't handle this. This is too scary.
Really?
Yeah. I'm actually very sensitive to a lot of it. Yeah.
Okay.
Like,
Scream is,
and then also people being chased with a blade when you can't see the guy's face. Nah, please don't put me through that.
There's a lot of that out there.
There's so much of that out there, and I just don't want to see it. I've kind of made myself watch some stuff just so that I understand the culture of a lot of it. Like,
well, there being a lot of it out there isn't.
I'll take it.
Just the fact that there's a lot of it out there, I feel like that's a slightly different thing than I don't know how to say this. Like, to me, that's not a personal connection. Like, it sounds like there's a personal connection for you that's not just. It wouldn't have mattered if there's a lot of it out there. Like one would have been too much. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's just like me and my pals and that, like, we wouldn't have thought it was cool or like thought it was interesting. We wouldn't have gone and sought that stuff out. And so
when I said hit a little too close to home, I think a better way to say this is something that's come up in some of our other interviews is that at least it seems a fair number of horror fans, they like to have, okay, this is our fantasy, but then there's this other stuff that's a little too much like real life, and that's not fun.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I have had so many break-ins in my life as well. Like, I just won't watch stuff with like home invasion. I won't watch stuff. I mean, there are exceptions, of course, because certain movies you just are like, I have to see this movie. But yeah, you've hit the nail on the head for me. Like, if it's too realistic, if it's a serial killer, it's home invasions. Like, movies that came out, I remember at the cinema that people would have been going to see were things like, what was that one with Jennifer, with J-Lo,
The Cell?
Yes, The Cell. No fucking way.
Tarsem Singh. What? No fucking way?
Fucking way was I going to see that.
No. It's a good story. It doesn't matter. It's visual eye candy. It is beautiful.
Well, then maybe I should see it now. But this is me talking about things that were too scary and too real.
Yeah, there is some creepy kidnapping aspect to it. No. You know what? If you want to see a good film by the same artist who, again, makes visually stunning movies, The Fall is another movie by...
I love The Fall.
Yes.
I'm crazy about The Fall.
Same guy did The Cell.
Oh my God. That's so funny. Yes, The Fall, all about The Fall. That's so funny. Of course, I can see the similarities because I would see a trailer or I would see bits and I'd just be like, I can't. Wow.
He loves that desert. The one in Africa, I think it is, with the white not plateau, but basin, and it's surrounded by stark orange sand.
Yes.
He puts that in like all of his movies and videos, I think.
So let's go back to, because it was a good tangent, but it was a bit of a tangent. So let's come back to, if I were to phrase the question like this, if you were to think of, say, 3 of your favorite horror movies that you appreciate now as an adult, what would be the first 3 that come off to the top of your head?
Rosemary's Baby is definitely my favorite. The Exorcist I saw fairly recently for the first time. And
Same. I had not seen it.
Right? I was just so impressed.
I get it now.
Enjoyed it so
I get what
much.
all the fuss is
Totally
about.
get it, yeah. And The Shining is extraordinary and brilliant. It's really hard to say 3. I mean, I still hold Videodrome real high, and Whatever Happened to Baby Jane.
Okay.
Well,
it's a schlocky,
but we're not really on
very fond of it.
top 3 favorite just yet. That's later on. But I think he was asking like more influences in your adult life.
Okay. Suspiria is definitely a massive influence as well.
Original or reboot?
Original.
Both? Of course.
And Get Out. As far as adult movies, horror movies that I've seen as a grown up, like Get Out, I just think is absolutely brilliant.
Rosemary's Baby. What did you like about that one?
I think the aesthetic is massive. I think the performance is super naturalistic, super hyper real, and just as we're saying, you know, I don't want to deal with stuff that's really real, but I don't want to.
I was going to say thank you for saying it.
I don't want to deal with extended torture, which was a big part of movies like Saw and stuff like that. I can't handle it. But I can definitely handle vampires. I guess The Lost Boys was a huge film for me too. But sorry, Rosemary's Baby, the aesthetic, the relationships, her tenacity at going forward and trying to get this thing worked out, and how every turn she's brought down. It's kind of like Joan of Arc-ish in a way. And the wonderful characters of, Ruth, the neighbors, so scary. They're so scary.
What's scary about them?
They pretend to be kind and they're cruel. I think I relate to Mia Farrow's character. I think probably a lot of female watching of that film, you relate to sort of trying to be nice and trying to do right and try to be safe in that way. And everything she does, she's just told she's insane, really, and then she was right.
Yeah.
So it's very satisfying because she was right. I'm just sort of working out in my head, why is it satisfying though? Because it's so awful for her, but it doesn't feel exploitative.
Affirmation.
Yeah.
Affirmation. There you go.
Yeah. And the reality check of like how the husband's like, oh, it was kind of sexy when you were passed out, in a kind of nympho kind of way, in a necro kind of way, and you're just looking at her going in her face and she's just trying to take this in. And there's just a lot of reality check stuff in that film.
What about The Exorcist?
The Exorcist, again, is just it's fucking cinema. It's just like every shot is just beautifully composed, but you feel very much in it, You feel the family drama of it. Again, like Rosemary's Baby, I suppose, but they're both family dramas. It just goes so far with Linda Blair's character, it just goes so far. And it's so edgy with the whole like fucking herself with a crucifix and shit. I mean, it's just...
That's usually the first extremity in that film in my mind goes to too. Same year, I hadn't seen it until just recently as an adult, and I'd always heard it was extreme. Like, yeah, whatever. And then, that's
that's a scene
to her, but
that happened, and she says that. Okay, let Jesus fuck you. Happy Easter, everyone! Once again.
Yeah, we didn't mention that at the start of the call, but we're recording this on Easter Sunday.
There have been a few poignant moments. But no, I think I kind of get what you're saying about what the effect and overall influence of The Exorcist is too, is because it's another thing that I've brought up a couple of times on the show is sometimes what's so influential and so entertaining and just appealing about horror is that it's well done, that the production is just a really good shot and tone and theme. And there was another one, but I forgot.
Ellen Burstyn,
that one.
In that is just phenomenal, and you really feel for these people. You really like them, and you get under their skin, and you experience it. It makes it very real, which is a big.
Oh yes, that was the other thing. That's if a film is good enough, or if a story is good enough and it draws you in, you become one of the characters almost, and you experience the story along with the characters because you feel like part of the group.
Yeah.
Hang on a second. Let's go back to The Exorcist. So you mentioned something about family drama that I thought was interesting. It's been a long time since I've seen parts of that movie. Remind me what the family drama is there.
I think there might be a second man in it or something.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there are two priests.
That sounds familiar. The young and an old one.
Yeah.
And there are those two guys. Is the mother not a single mother after and goes? There's a guy that comes in or something.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not. I don't know. I think there's a similarity though. Interestingly, for me, sort of thinking about my own head is like the mother's trying to get help for her daughter, right? And she's not being given the help she needs. Mm-hmm. And in Rosemary's Baby, she's trying to figure out, for herself because she feels like she's going crazy, but she also feels like this is really happening around her with the possession, with the pregnancy being, something dangerous. Mm-hmm. And they're both being told, no, everything you can't, this isn't real kind of thing.
Yeah. So by like familial or part of a family, I mean, it's like both stories are people that are kind of trying to fix or help their family and asking others for help and being denied.
Yeah, and I guess both are also in this sort of familial home. I guess also that was why I was saying that as well. It's really so much of Mia Farrow in Rosemary's Baby is her in that fucking building in that
I'm
house.
seeing some connections here with Get Out as well.
Oh yeah. And then I was going to say, and that the family homes where everybody's visiting with The Exorcist, and I guess also that look of like, well, one would be 70s, one would be, was The Exorcist still 70s?
I think so. Maybe later 70s, one is earlier 70s.
And they just cast like interesting, great actors in big movies back then. People look like people.
Rather than going into the potential similarities of Get Out, let's talk about Suspiria instead. What interested you in Suspiria?
The colors, the music, the female horror again, I suppose. She was brave and she was terrified.
At the same time.
Yeah. And the witchy poo of the whole thing. Yeah. And I think there's a sort of, there's an aesthetic that probably in some of his work is exploitative, the female, but certainly there's certainly it appeals to me in the beauty of it as well.
Have you had any recurring nightmares or recurring dreams as an adult?
Yeah.
Pass.
Pass.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything scary in real life hasn't happened as an adult? Also pass.
That's gonna be a pass, isn't it?
Let me try and think about something so scary. Oh God, when you think about scary, I go to reality too much, and I'm like, what?
I mean, that's valid.
Interesting that can be talked about. That's scary.
Well, we also just survived a global pandemic. There's that whole thing.
Surviving.
Yeah, that was pretty scary. Yeah.
All right.
And I think I'll start shutting down with things like I just feel too close to the bone. I'm like,
yeah.
Yeah.
How about the flip of it? In your adult life, has there been a time where you're completely calm or safe or blessed?
Yeah, lots of times. Sex is really great.
I will also put a mark in that category.
Amongst consenting adults.
Yes.
It's fucking great.
No complaints.
Yeah, I love being with my dogs who are actually reminding me that it's 2 o'clock. I need to get them there at 2 because 4 p.m. is 2 o'clock for them. Being with them, being with family and like my sister's bubs, that's really gorgeous. And exercise, like as a grown up, having found running, cycling, and
I was about to say, I think they call it runner's high.
Yeah, I always loved cycling as a youngin as well. the wind in your hair. I think it's things I loved doing when I was 9 years old are still things I love doing.
Yeah, we hadn't gotten a chance to talk too much about the animals in nature. That has come up briefly 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
I suppose in relation to horror, that's probably that's certainly influenced my work a lot. Like characters I played generally have some animal side to them that I'm influenced by. A lot of physical stuff I've done in horror, has been quite animalistic.
I think that's probably why the Woman series is one of my favorites, is because I like that feral human beings in modern society kind of stories. Like, it's always been interesting to me.
Yeah. I tell you another really bloody good horror movie that I love as an adult is oh god, it's gone again. Fuck me. No, it's gone. Don't know why the hell came and went so fast.
Something about feral human beings?
Yeah. This is about cannibals. It's
one of Chris's
friend-
favorite
now you're
topics.
speaking my language.
my friend is
Let's
in
see. Was it Raw?
it.
No? Okay. Bones and All? More recently?
No.
I still haven't seen that one.
No.
Well, shit. Now I'm drawing blank.
Completely ridiculous. But it was a remake of a Mexican film, and it was directed by a friend of mine, and we went on to work together on Happen Learning.
We Are What We Are.
We are what we are.
Yes.
That was great.
So good. I've seen both, and I prefer the reboot just because the original is almost a little bit more violent and angry, and the reboot, it just has, from the opening scene with the soundtrack, it's so sad in a good way, like a good tall glass of sad movie that's very clenching.
And I'm thinking of the other cannibal one that's so great that Lucky has suggested I watch before we were doing The Woman. And Robert Carlyle is in it. And
Ravenous.
Ravenous! So good.
Just watched it again the other day, probably for the 90th time. I can't watch it enough. It's so great.
It's so great. And The Descent by Neil Marshall. Fucking brilliant.
Let's jump in. So the last couple questions here are more like wrap-up questions covering your entire life. I'm going to give you the next 2 questions at the same time because it could be the same answer for both, or it could be a different answer. But if you had to pick a favorite movie, is one, and then the other one is what movie have you watched more times than any other? Because it may not be the same as your favorite.
Ooh, in the horror genre.
No, this is covering any genre.
Oh my God. Okay, now I have to widen my head out. Okay.
Can even be a comedy, something stupid like Weekend at Bernie's.
I think I've probably watched Anchorman a hell of a lot of times.
Okay.
But I think I've probably watched Funny Face with Audrey Hepburn and Fred Astaire even more. I've probably watched Grey Gardens, the original documentary, maybe even more than that.
I'm not familiar with that one.
Grey Gardens, about the mother and daughter who live in a broken down house in the Hamptons. Jackie Onassis's aunt and cousin. And it was made into a TV movie for HBO, or maybe it was a TV show, I can't remember, with Drew Barrymore and Jessica, Christ alive, ballbags.
What do you like about that one?
Story, who's absolutely brilliant.
What do you like about that one?
The madness of this pair. One of the best character studies I've ever watched. And they're real people. And they're all singing, all dancing, all dressing up like in crazy clothes. Yeah, it's the madness. I love the madness of this film. And it's a story you're trying to work out what the truth is of what they're saying and what's bullshit, really. Because they have different versions of how their lives have come to where they've come.
Okay.
Something sad, romantic, weird. Quite into those things.
Okay. Favorite movie overall?
Dog Day Afternoon, probably.
Why?
Probably still Dog Day Afternoon. Sad, romantic, weird.
There you go. The formula works.
Humor in reality of what it is to be human. Complex, extraordinary characters. The 70s, which is just gorgeous. A true story. Politically, sociologically speaking, I think it's extraordinarily powerful. I'd ride the face off Al Pacino.
Al, if you're listening.
Just out loud.
Ooh, yeah, we should get him on the show.
Ooh.
He was the devil.
Yeah. He's been everything.
Yeah.
I got to see him in play once. I got to see him in Salome
Nice.
in New York. He was amazing.
Do you see any common threads about what kind of horror you like? Cannibalism, occult, metaphysical?
What are my options? Metaphysical?
I mean,
They were just examples.
examples.
Just like
big fan of a vampire
okay.
situation.
that tracks with the reading of Interview of a Vampire Comics earlier.
Yeah. And like, even, when Nicolas Cage did, was it Vampire's Kiss?
Ah, yes.
So fucking good.
That is just, that movie is so great. There are so many memes as a result of this movie now.
And also Dracula, which again was a cinema movie that I saw as a teen. Bram
Stoker's?
Yeah. And Winona Ryder being just, one of our heroines of that time, like me and my friends, because of Heathers and Pump Up the Volume.
Yeah, that's another good one.
Yeah.
Heathers.
I did a movie with Winona Ryder in it that the writer of Heathers wrote and directed. It's called Sex and Death 101. And I play a lesbian astronaut who has a threesome with my girlfriend and Simon Baker. Simon Baker's.
That's what it was. I was looking at your profile earlier, and that kept coming up on the the reel that IMDb pans through, and I recognized it, but I didn't know which movie it was from. Sex and Death 101. Yeah.
So at this point, there's still 2 or 3 questions left, but we like to give sort of a summary of the topics that have been sort of coming up on the call at this point. And you can have an opportunity to correct me if you think that I'm wrong, or if there's a better description of the topics that have been coming up. But the things that I've been hearing coming up multiple times, really, I think the best summary would be feminism and power dynamics, and the affirmation of courage and strength that, all of this kind of can be summarized under the banner of feminism, because, it deals with all of those things. Sex, is a big topic. Both sex and power dynamics are a big topic in all of the vampire movies that we've talked about.
Yep.
Sigourney Weaver in Aliens, again, power and strength and sexuality as well.
Mm-hmm.
The relationship dynamics in Rosemary's Baby and Suspiria. Your words for Suspiria was brave but terrified.
Yeah.
And as sort of a minor, if we're talking like college degrees, a major and a minor, the minor would be dressing up in crazy clothes and parties, which I think kind of ties in with the affirmation part of, affirming life.
Yeah, I was just thinking how much John Waters movies were a huge thing for me growing up as well. That sort of the horror and the disgustingness of
yeah,
life affirming,
yeah,
boldness.
Yes,
with sex as well.
Yeah. Do you think these are accurate summary of some of the things that you get out of horror, or do you think there's a better? They'll
put in a disclaimer. No, Mummy, he's got it all wrong.
Well, I mean,
No, I'm kidding. I think that's really smart. I think that's probably true.
Well, what I was going to say is I think even your mother would probably understand that, even as her own, adulthood, that these are things that all people deal with, not just women.
Yeah.
It's just that maybe is part of the lens that you're viewing it through at this particular moment. And the follow-up question to that is usually, do you have any idea why those things are important to you? I think that possibly has been touched on indirectly in the questions that didn't get answered. So the next question would be, why horror? Because couldn't you address some of these kinds of topics in other genres?
Yeah, and I think I did. I think I do in my watching as well, and in my filmmaking as well. Mm-hmm. The first opportunity to make a feature that I was offered was to direct a sequel to The Woman. And I said, well, can I have a bang at writing it? And I think what I did with what I wrote, what I made was explore those themes through horror in that film. I think with you saying, making that quite succinct and smart summation of what in horror has appealed to me the most, I think that's the same thing I did with Darlin. It's about sex and power dynamics, and being a young woman who is being who's being sexualized before she's ready for it. And I won't give away spoilers because, I hope that people will watch Darlin for the first time, some of them after hearing this. But there is a moment in the opening of that film when the character of Darlin, young teenage girl, steps on a very phallic mushroom. It's called a stinkhorn mushroom, and it grows like a penis. And it actually grows out of what looks like two little balls. It's the weirdest thing. And I remember one of the producers during the edit, me and Julie Garces were editing, and they said, do we really need this thing? This is the only sort of magical moment in the film or whatever. Or do we really need this?
They didn't see the symbolism?
No. What's this about? And when I explained what it was about, to be fair, they went, oh, okay. And I was like, when you're like, for me, it was like 12, 13. And for other people, it might be another age. But for me, the age where things started growing on my body that was for other people symbolized sexuality. I felt that sexuality was being foisted upon me by adults out and about in the world. And I just wanted to grow and experience it first for myself. Do you know what I mean? To not, as a young woman, to not really be allowed to be comfortable in your own body because you've got tits and an ass that are being objectified outside of your experience of them,
Isn't it interesting the spectrum, the breadth of differences that women across the world have in terms of their relationships at all ages of life that are really influenced at a fairly early age, just simply based on whether or not they are ready for that conversation.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how, and really what it boils down to is consent. That having or not having consent completely changes the dynamic of a situation that can then affect you for the rest of your life.
It's important.
Yeah.
But what I'm getting at is part of the consent equation is whether the person is ready for it. Yeah.
I think there's still even in this time where we're trying to make real steps forward. Some of us are. I still think it's a more common experience for young male identifying people to feel that they can do what they want, and for female identifying people to feel that they might be told what they want rather than looking for it inside of themselves.
Yeah.
And one of the great things about more diversity in voices in cinema and horror as well, though I think that a lot of male horror filmmakers are great at this too, I think in many ways it's an outsider's genre, is that what is inside of us as female identifying people is perhaps not always as palatable. We're aware of that too. But it should be as expressed as anyone else. It should have as much opportunity to be considered a norm as the male. What's inside of the male, sense of themselves. It's pretty basic shit, but you know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah. Let's go back to the question of why horror.
Yeah.
Is there a reason that you prefer this genre to tell your stories rather than?
I think that was where I was also trying to go with Darlin, is that I don't think and I hope this isn't a terrible disappointment, but I don't think that horror is my preferred genre to tell these stories in. No, I think that it is one of the genres that I love and appreciate. And
you're ambidextrous.
Tell stories, but but I think that's the reason why I was saying that was the first opportunity for a feature to be, asked to make as a filmmaker. But the first film I actually made was a 35-minute short called Perfect, which is about a comedian, a sort of seemingly gregarious comedian who's actually a bit of a mess. Because I knew I couldn't make a film about an actress because nobody would give a shit. So I made her a female comic, and also because I love that world. And I would say that is a dark comedy, And then getting away from it all, of course, they're made after Darlin as part of Deathcember, as part of the portmanteau Deathcember is a horror. But now Quicksand that I've made since then is a drama. So I think I'll continue to use different genres to explore things I'm interested in. But if you ask why horror can be so effective in the things that interest me in both watching and making, I think there's a pinprick in the bubble of hypocrisy that horror does so well, where when you expose the flesh and bones and blood of what we are as human animals, you take away the hypocrisy that we should be more mannered or more robotic or more, you know what I mean? Or more like part of a system.
More civil.
More civil, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there's something really exciting in there. And also why horror? Because when you're dealing with life and death, I mean, the stakes are so damn high. When you're dealing with fear, again, the nuance involved in fear is something that can take you like an animal. And it can also teach you what is working for you and what isn't, you know, what's good for you and what isn't. It can allow you to stand up for yourself or shrink, you know. Fear is a big, fascinating state to explore things from the perspective of, you know.
Right. Some of the things that you've said here are things that has been echoed in other, or have been echoed in other interviews. So you're not alone in that. I like what you said about this pinprick in exposing hypocrisy. I want to use the word violent, but that's not it. Even the word violent seems greater than what I'm trying to say, but there's a violation or a crossing of a boundary, I guess, there. I mean, it's not a bad thing. It's just an observation. But I don't know. I like that phrase, pinprick in exposing hypocrisy.
The human capacity for cruelty is terrifying on its own in you know, just as an experience of being a human, that we the things we see, the news used to upset the hell out of me when I was young. You know, I didn't understand why animals were going extinct. I didn't understand why children were starving, you know. I just couldn't understand how any of this could be allowed to happen, you know. And so there is hypocrisy involved in so many elements of the way that we do things that allow all of this to go on. And so, yeah, so I say all that to say, for me personally, I think you're right with the horror, that is a definite positive in horror, that it can kind of name and shame a bit the forces of darkness, really. Like, you know, the obvious places like Romero and stuff, you know, his work. But like, yeah, I'm agreeing with you.
Well, last question. Is there anything that you've thought of that hasn't come up on the call? Maybe you thought of something in the conversation, took a left turn, and you didn't get to say it. Anything that you think is relevant that we didn't discuss?
No. Oh, there's a great British movie called Sightseers, which is a comedy horror, which if people haven't seen it, definitely check out. You guys seen Sightseers?
I have not.
That sounds familiar.
They go off on a caravan holiday. People die.
How is it related
Well, that
to the
it's just one of the movies that I was thinking of and wrote down when I was thinking about horrors that I've loved, and I didn't mention it. And oddly, next to it is The Lost Daughter, which is that Olivia Colman movie on Netflix that Maggie Gyllenhaal made, which isn't really a horror, but it's kind of dark and horrific as well. And then as far as mentioning things from myself, I suppose I got 2 movies coming out that I made in Ireland earlier on last year. One is called Double Blind, which is about a bunch of people going in for a drug experiment. And it's not a horror. It kind of is a horror. I don't know. It's like
psychological thriller, kind of.
There's blood. There's everything. There's psychology. There's psychological horror. There's physical horror. There's lots in it. So they're probably calling it sci-fi because it's a drug test that hasn't happened yet. But I'd say it's a horror. And I definitely play a horror character in it.
Okay.
I'm looking forward to people seeing that. And then another movie called Apocalypse Clown, which will introduce more people to Natalie Palamides, which is a great thing. She has a special on Netflix called Nate, a one-man special, and she is a woman, and it is phenomenal and dark and weird. But she's in Apocalypse Clown, and I get to play a weird character in that too. It's a comedy, but it's pretty gross, so it's fun.
You know what's funny is like earlier when we were talking about different genres, why not different genres? And you'd said, I do like other genres, and there's these other things that I've done. But looking back through the notes that I've taken throughout the call, there are movies that, for example, Videodrome and Suspiria, that and others as well, but just those off the top of my head, that I don't know of anybody that I've talked to who isn't a horror fan that's seen those movies.
Mm.
So
it's weird how many people don't know about Dario Argento or early Cronenberg stuff, I guess.
I suppose
weird.
People who are into like film in general, might be aware of some of those things. But all I'm saying is that I understand that you're saying this is not just what I like, but it does seem to be a fairly good piece of the pie, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. It was fun. It was fun noting things down in this way before this chat, because I think it really looked very clear to me that way too. Think about your life sort of influenced by horror is like a much more interesting way to come at things than, we're going to talk about your movies and what you've done and stuff and what's coming up.
Yeah, we get that a lot. A lot of guests are.
But it really takes you into your subconscious and into your child head, and that's just fascinating, And I don't take coincidences too lightly because I think if your eyes and ears are open, you can learn a lot from these sort of patterns that repeat, as it were, that we were talking about before, the time spiral and whatnot. Time being a spiral. I'm certainly often in a time spiral. But I went over to see my friend Randy yesterday, who had just found a little kitten. She lives nearby in New Jersey. I've known her since I was 17. I hadn't seen her.
Don't tell me it was a Siamese with two different color eyes.
That would have been so perfect.
Right?
But just by coincidence, her husband Malik was watching that Shudder show about, the scariest movies and stuff. And so I was having this conversation with my dear old friend with this thing on in the background. And I kept seeing people that I know, from my life in this genre. And it felt a bit weird to keep saying, oh, and that's my friend too, because it's like, yeah, whatever. You're on the telly, people on the telly. Like, can we talk about
You don't understand. It's from different times and different movies. I know that one too.
But it was, seeing Greg Nicotero and Ryan Turek and Alex Esso and Dana Gould and all these people. And it just reminded me how much horror is a huge part of my life. And because, and seeing some clips from these phenomenal films, many of which I've avoided because, like I say, I am really sensitive to scary stuff. And going, I want to watch more horrors. And now I have this sort of guide, from this experience.
It's funny too that a lot of the people that post online saying, I'm a horror fan, I haven't seen anything that does it for me, here's some movies that I liked, what would you recommend, what movies have you liked? And I'm always like, you're asking the wrong questions. Find out what scares you first, and then ask for things related to that, and then you might find something interesting.
Yeah. And I take it your 12-step stuff is from a trauma-informed perspective, because I think what's really coming out for me, and I don't want to ask you personal questions, not about that, but what's coming out for me as well, and what you're saying, it crosses over another way in my world, where I'm thinking about writing stuff about when I was younger to just really process things more and to understand myself more and to help myself more. But I think, having known a lot of people who went through AA and having gone to Al-Anon for a good deal of time myself, I'm really encouraged by a new perspective on addiction that I'm hearing a lot more about, is this sort of, what's the story that you've grown up with, and what might be your reasons for needing to numb out, or get a lot of dopamine in your system or whatever,
Yeah.
And I think it's a really humane way of dealing with, again, not making things black and white. Oh, that person's an addict. This, I'm not, because I'm stronger than that or something. You know what I mean? This kind of like idea that there are people that are just fucked up and aren't doing it right. I think it's really beautiful that you're trying to help people understand, horror fans, for instance, because I think you're coming at it from a really intelligent perspective and one that appeals to me is what I'm saying.
Thank you. I think something that I didn't really understand until I was a couple years into the journey is that through counseling and the 12-step stuff, I was learning new tools to resolve emotional turmoil that had happened earlier in my life that I didn't know how to deal with.
Yeah.
And as I was learning the different tools of recovery, which is what the book I wrote is about, as I was learning these different tools, I was kind of, if you visualize, sitting in front of a pile of shit, basically pile of crap that needed to be dealt with. And what I was doing is I would pick something up and go, okay, do I have the tools to deal with this? No. Okay, I'm going to put it in pile number 2. Pick the next thing up. Do I have the tools to deal with this? And if I did, then I'd do what needed to be done, and I could put it into a third pile and say, okay, that's been taken care of. And what I realized at that moment was that all of my life, I had been told that I'm somebody who spends too much time overthinking and things, complicating things. And really what was going on is I kept picking things up from the pile and going, do I have something to do? Do I have a tool to deal with this? No. And putting it in the pile into pile number 2. I never had a pile number 3 because I never had the tools that I needed to go through the stuff. And the beauty of it is now that I do have these tools, I'm now able to resolve some of these things. And so my pile has gotten a lot smaller. Yeah, there are still a couple things that still need to be worked on. Either I don't have the time, or less likely that I don't have the tools, and more it's just I know it's a big thing that needs to be dealt with. I don't have time right now. But some of what you were talking about, I think in what you said a minute ago, is there are other people who have a different approach, which is I'm just going to ignore the pile. Or I might even need substances to help me ignore the pile, or activities or what have you, because there's a lot of different kinds of addictions. But I think that kind of tied in with what you said. I kind of lost my train of thought there for a moment.
There were a couple of trains there.
Yeah. I think we got the same kind of brain, dude.
Have you also been reorganizing your mind palace for the last 10 years?
What is this Zencaster machine I've been plugged into? Sure. What are you doing to me?
Nothing bad, I promise. Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I mean, we can continue talking all day if you'd like. Actually, we can't. About an hour from now, we have a listen party on our Discord server that we'll have to jump onto. But, we have still a little more time. What I can do, though, is I'm going to hit stop. Actually, let me hit the closing first, and then I'll stop recording. That'd be a good idea.
Yeah, do the closing.
Actually, I flubbed the closing so badly. I just said screw it, and I would fix it later. So you're going to be able to tell there's a difference in the audio on this.
Excellent post.
Yes, thank you to Pollyanna again for being our guest. Thank you to everybody out there listening. A special thank you to Legion Podcasts for supporting us on Patreon. If you are not able to support us on Patreon, the best thing you can do is tell a friend, because we are still in growth mode. There's also merch that you can purchase on the website and other things you can check out on the website as well. So check that out. Again, horrormakesushappy.com.